Hello, good afternoon. My name is Menard Daphnis. I am the Director of Financial Aid for the Miami-Dade College Wolfson campus, and I am delighted to have this opportunity to speak with you or share some information with you that will hopefully be beneficial to you as you pursue your educational goals. A couple of ground rules as we go along. If you have any questions at any point during the presentation, please go ahead and ask. And don't forget the dumb question is the question you didn't ask. So please feel free, go ahead and ask questions as we go along. Well, we'll start with what is financial aid? If I were to come to you and ask you about what you think financial aid is, it is really a source of a way for you to pay for sources to help pay for your college education. It comes in the form of scholarships, grants, loans, and even employment opportunities. When someone says financial aid, and many students sometimes have the misconception that a financial aid is only a type of financial aid, which we'll call a Pell Grant. So when they complete the FAFSA and they get a response that makes a reference to the Pell Grant, they tend to say that they're eligible or not eligible for financial aid. But financial aid is any source of support, any support you receive to help pay for your college education. And again, it comes as scholarships, grants, loans, and employment opportunities. Where does financial aid come from? The primary source of financial aid is the federal government. Financial aid also comes from the state. It also comes from the institution you are attending, and it comes from private sources. Burger King could be a source of financial aid. McDonald's could be a source of financial aid, and those are usually in the form of scholarships. So financial aid comes from a variety of sources, again with the primary source being the federal government. But it also comes from the state, the school you are attending, and private sources. There are 4 different types of financial aid which can be classified into 2 types. You have gift aid, which are the grants and the scholarships. Those are usually need-based and merit-based. And those are 2 types of financial aids that you don't need to pay back. Okay? Grants are usually based on need. As you fill out your FAFSA, the feds do ask you for certain financial information which puts you in certain need category. And the grants are usually based on the need level you show based on your personal information, financial information, you and your parents if you're a dependent student. Whereas scholarships are primarily based on merit. That means you're exceptional at doing something, whether you're an exceptional student, you excel academically, or you are an athlete who's really good at whatever you do. Whereas self-help aids are loans and employment opportunities, which also could be need-based. But self-help aids, the loans you got to pay back, and you pay them back with interest, and the employment opportunities, you have to work for them. So those are the 2 types of financial aid. Gift aid, which you don't pay back, and self-help, which you either have to pay back or you have to work for. How do you apply for financial aid? What do you need to do to position yourself in such a way that you receive consideration for some sort of financial aid? There are 2 ways to apply for financial aid, and the most important form you will complete is what we call the FAFSA. It's the free application for federal student aid. It comes as early as possible. It comes as early as January 1st of every year, and students are encouraged to complete the FAFSA as early as possible. The timeline to follow each year is from January to March. Some institutions have a priority deadline of March 1st to complete the FAFSA. And if you find yourself having to submit documents to the school you plan to attend, by April, May, you should be submitting those documents. But again, the way to apply is to complete what we call the FAFSA, which is the free application for federal student aid. There are 2 ways you can complete that form. You can complete it electronically, or you can complete a paper application. As you will find now, there are certain benefits to completing the application electronically as opposed to doing it online. If you will be doing it electronically, the way you sign it is through what's called the PIN. The PIN is a number that you create that identifies you as yourself in the eyes of the federal government. Okay, it takes only about 4 or 5 minutes to create your PIN. And the PIN you create today is the same PIN you will be using for every time you have to complete the FAFSA or any federal student aid form. And my personal recommendation is, even if you don't think you will qualify for financial aid or what you may perceive to be financial aid, still complete the FAFSA every academic year you plan to be in school. What are some of the things that you need to have with you as you complete the FAFSA? You need to have a valid social security number. You need to have prior income information. And many times I hear that students do not want to complete it because they are waiting for the parents or themselves to complete the tax return. If for any reason the tax forms will not be available to you at the moment you are filling out the FAFSA, it's still recommended you do an estimation with the income document you may have, whether it be the last paycheck stub or your W-2 form. Still complete the FAFSA and submit it with that information. You can always go back after you submit the FAFSA to make the corrections or correct whatever the information that was reported based on the estimation. Okay, but what you want to do is by March 1st is to have that FAFSA completed, even if you have to estimate the information on the income portion of the FAFSA. Okay, so you do need to have a valid social security number, information about your prior year's income and your parents if you're a dependent student. And if you will be filing electronically, you do need to have a PIN for yourself. And if you're a dependent student and have to use your parents' information, one for your parents as well. What are some of the things that the federal government looks at to determine your eligibility? Okay. Sorry, we need to get number 9. Some of the things that the feds look at when you do your FAFSA to see if you are meeting the eligibility requirements. If you're a student applying, in your case you have not yet done a FAFSA, so you have not applied for a student loan, that's not going to be a concern. But there are certain individuals that took out loans and the time came for them to pay back and they don't. When that happens, the federal government puts you in a category that says default. And if you're in default, that would disqualify you for federal financial aid. You cannot owe on a federal grant or loan. You must be also doing well academically in school to maintain eligibility. And you cannot be convicted of possessing or selling drugs, because those are things that would make you ineligible for federal financial aid. Now, after you submit your information to the federal government, is that the end of the process or is that just the beginning? Now, when you submit your FAFSA to the feds, they have no idea if the information you are reporting to them is accurate or if it represents you. So what they do is they check with certain agencies to make sure that the information you are putting matches with what those agencies have on record for you, matches what you are putting on the FAFSA. They check with the Social Security Administration to verify that your Social Security number is your Social Security number and that the citizenship status you are claiming matches the citizenship status the Social Security Administration has on record for you. They check with the Department of Homeland Security to see if you claim to be an eligible non-citizen, to see if that status meets the eligibility requirements for federal student aid. If you are a male between the ages of 18 and 26, you are required to register with the Selective Service, so they'll do a check with them to see if you've registered. If they also check with the Department of Justice to see if your eligibility was not suspended because you were convicted of selling or possessing drugs. And also they check with what's called the National Student Loan Data System to see if you are not in default on a previous student loan. Now remember, just a little while ago I mentioned the difference between completing the paper application and doing it electronically. There are some stark differences between doing it electronically and doing it online. The electronic application, if you do it online, it takes literally about 4 to 5 days to process. Whereas if you do a paper application, it takes between 4 to 6 weeks. You are saving more than a month time by doing the paper, by doing the form electronically as opposed to doing it via paper format. Um, Also, there are certain built-in mechanisms when you do it electronically that will alert you if you're about to make a mistake, that will tell you that to rethink your answer that the paper application does not have. Also, a couple of cool features that the federal government has implemented in the FOX is the ability to load your tax information directly onto your FOXA by linking that information directly from the IRS to your FOXA by when you are doing it electronically. That's a feature you don't have access to when you do a paper application. And another cool thing is if you have to make corrections to your FOXA, if you do a paper application, you have to wait until the federal government communicates back to you and sends you what's called a student aid report, and you have to manually make the corrections on the student aid report and mail it back to them. Whereas you can, if you do it electronically, the minute they send the response back to you, within 4 or 5 days, you are able to go back and make any adjustments you need to make. So electronic application beats paper application no matter which way you look at it. After you submit the FOXA, the feds will communicate with you as well as the institution or institutions you put on the FOXA when you are completing it. As you are completing the FOXA, they will be asking for what institution or institutions you plan to attend. All of the institutions you attend, once the Department of Education processes your FOXA, they will send email communication to you and to the school you plan to you listed on the FOXA, and the response you will get from them will be in the form of what's called the student aid report. It's the SAR, and the SAR is a summary of the information you would have put on the FOXA. Okay. Now, once the school gets a copy of your SAR, the school will also be in communication with you to let you know that they've received your information, what you need to do, or what steps need to be taken to complete the process to get your financial aid done. If you do a paper application, when you get the student aid report, please review the student aid report, and if you have to make corrections, you need to make sure you make the corrections and mail the student aid report back to the Department of Education. If you do it electronically, you still have the responsibility of reviewing the information on the student aid report and making the corrections, and you can do so electronically. And the student aid report, if everything is correct, all matches, and it's the accurate information, you don't need to submit it again to your school because the school would have had a copy of that information from the Department of Education. It's for your personal records. You don't need to submit it to the school. Now, when you send your information to the feds, again, even though they will be doing the checks with the different agencies to see if the information you are putting, if your information matches the information you are putting on the form, they also sometimes select a few individuals for a process called verification. And the verification process is where they ask the school to collect documents from you and your parents if you're a dependent student to make sure the information you are reporting is accurate. And one of the cool things about using the IRS retrieval tool is even if you are selected for verification, you will not have to bother with having to submit any documentation regarding your income to the school, because that information would have been loaded directly from the IRS. But if you are selected for that process called the verification, to where we have to confirm, or the school has to confirm the accuracy of the information you put, you will have to submit to the school a copy of your and your parents' tax transcript. if you're a dependent student, and if you're a married individual, your and your spouse's tax transcripts if you do it separately. And also you have to complete what's called a verification worksheet. Okay, and that's what happens after you submit your FAFSA. If you are not selected for verification, then those documents will not be asked of you from the school you plan to attend. But again, if you are selected for that process, you can rest assured those two documents will be requested: the IRS tax transcript and also the verification worksheet. And if you did use the IRS data retrieval tool, your information would have been loaded directly from the IRS to your FAFSA. That's one less document. Even if you are selected for verification, you will have to worry about submitting to your school. I hope this really walked you through what to expect during the process. And right now, if you have any questions, please go ahead and ask. I'll be more than happy to enlighten you. Okay, we do have one question, and it says, we aren't planning to complete the FAFSA because we know we won't qualify. Should we do it anyway? My personal recommendation, again, is there's a lot of misconceptions in terms of who will be eligible and who will not be eligible for financial aid. Do not take it upon yourself to say you are not going to be eligible for financial aid and therefore not complete a FAFSA. Whether you think you will be eligible or not, it is strongly recommended that you complete the FAFSA. Strongly recommended. There's another question. It says, do I have to be a full-time student in order to receive financial aid? That's a very good question. Now, for most of the different types of financial aids a person could be eligible for, they do require that you are at least a half-time student. There are 4 levels of enrollment. There is less than half-time. In most traditional colleges and universities, that's someone taking between 1 and 5 college credits. There is half-time, that's someone enrolled between 6 to 8 credits. There's 3/4 time, and that's someone enrolled in between 9 and 11 credits. And there's full-time. Full-time is someone enrolled in 12 or more credits. And most of the different types of financial aids that are available, whether it be a state type of financial aid or federal, they do require that you are in attendance at least as a half-time student. So if you are not a full-time student, you could still be eligible for financial aid, and in the overwhelming majority of the cases, it would be for most of the different types of financial aid. But you do need to have at least half-time attendance, which would be between 6 to 8 credits. And as far as when it comes to the Pell Grant, which is the most basic form of financial aid an individual could be eligible for, you don't necessarily have to be at least half-time. You can take between 1 and 5 credits and still be eligible. It all depends on where in the eligibility bracket you fall. The case is not the same for everyone, but the answer to that, the short answer to that question, do I have to be a full-time student in order to receive financial aid, is no. You do not have to be a full-time student. In most cases, you need to be at least half-time, and in the case of the Pell Grant, which again is the most basic form of financial aid, you need to have you can be enrolled in less than 6 credits and still get it, but it all depends on your need level as demonstrated by your information on your student aid report. Another very good question, and for those of you entering who are fresh and don't have an academic record, it's very important. Are there any academic requirements or conditions for the renewal of financial aid? Now, a student coming in from high school has a blank slate, meaning they're coming in and they're admitted as a good student. And that student, if they meet the need requirement to be eligible for financial aid, will be eligible for financial aid. Now, a continuing student after your first year of college, you do need to demonstrate that you are performing well academically in order to maintain eligibility. Okay? Because the way the feds look at you in terms of your eligibility for financial aid is they look at you as an investment. And every time you apply for financial aid, they're considering your worth. And the way your worth is calculated or evaluated is through your academic performance. So most institutions do have, if there are financial aid eligible institutions, do have to have what's called a standards of academic progress policy. And that policy will have them calculate your academic performance, whether it be yearly or semester by semester, to see if you're worthy of maintaining eligibility. And the three major components of the major components that they use are the GPA. Are you a student who's performing at least at a 2.0 level? And you know the scale is, you have four grades that you can get. A, and that's someone who's done well in the classes and is doing great, and they earn 4 points per, for a letter of A. B, C, D, and F. A person who's maintaining at least a 2.0 is a C level, and that's what the feds require a student to maintain. So at the evaluation period, after you've had a performance with the school, every year the school has the obligation to look at your performance to see if you are performing at least at a C level to maintain eligibility. The second component is your completion rate. What completion of the classes you are attempting are you completing? Some institutions, it varies from institution, but here at the college I work for, the required percentage is 67%. And there's also a cap on how many credits, which is the third component, and that's what's called a 150% or 120%, depending on the institution you're attending, which is a cap on how many credits you can attempt to earn the degree you are pursuing. If you're not meeting any of those requirements, then you could lose your eligibility for financial aid. So your performance academically is very important. So once you get in school, it is very good to be performing well if you want to continue to receive financial aid. Additionally, performing well can be rewarding in the forms of scholarships you may be able to receive, because you can have two students with the same set of information, and one has A, Y, B types financial aid, and the other one only has A type financial aid, because the first student who's getting the A, B, C type financial aid is a student who's performing well, whereas the who's doing exceptionally well, whereas the student who's only getting A with the same set of information as the other student is only getting A because they're just an average student. So it does pay literally to be a very good student. At least to maintain eligibility, you have to be an average student, because if you are not, then you may lose eligibility. So again, the question is, are there academic requirements or conditions for the renewal of financial aid? The answer is yes, because the school that you will be attending is required to keep a record of your academic and evaluate your eligibility based on your academic performance, if not by semester, at least per academic year. And if, in case you are wondering what the academic year is, it's the length of time that you do your application for when it comes to the FAFSA. The academic year has 3 semesters in it. It's got fall, spring, and summer. In most traditional colleges and universities, the fall semester is the semester that begins in August and it goes all the way through to December. The spring semester, or winter, some universities or colleges will call it, is the semester that begins in January and goes all the way to April, the end of April. And the summer is from May to July or August. So you need to be familiar with the term academic year, okay? Because when you do your FAFSA, it's good for an academic year, and your performance academically will be calculated based on the academic year as well. We do have another question. It says, if I don't apply for financial aid this year, will that affect my eligibility for financial aid in subsequent years? No. The question again is, if I don't apply for financial aid this year, will that affect my eligibility for financial aid in subsequent years? Again, the answer is no. What you do each year has nothing to do with another year. This year, the information that you are putting on your FAFSA has absolutely no relation with the information that will need to be put in for the next academic year or the year after. So each academic year is unique, and the information you put for that academic year is only good and valid for that academic year. It does not transfer over to the next year, or you can't look at it to go back to previous years. So the answer is no, it does not affect it. We'll do a quick recap. If you have any additional questions, please, right now is the time. But some of pointers I'd like to leave you with that's very important, that will prove to be very beneficial to your academic journey is, number one, to be conscious of what an academic year is. Number two, the timeline to apply, and that's done every academic year. The timeline is every year from January to March. Make sure the FAFSA gets done. And from March to May, the latest, if you are selected for that process we talked about called verification, and have to submit documents to your school, make sure those documents are turned into the school by May the latest. And also make sure you perform well academically, because not performing well can result in you losing eligibility. So again, when you do get into school, make it a priority to do well. And okay, we have one more question. Where do I go to apply for financial aid? What you mentioned, completing the form electronically. What is the address to complete the form electronically? The address to complete the form electronically is www.fafsa.gov. Now, you have to be very cautious when you go and that you put the exact address, because if you put fafsa.com, it's going to go to an organization that charges you. The financial aid process should be a free process. No one or no institution should be charging you for helping you to complete the FAFSA. If any institution is charging you, please remove yourself from contact with that entity, because the process should be a free process. And again, the site that you go to is www.fafsa.gov. Do not go to fafsa.com, because if you do, again, they will charge you, and they should not be charging you for that process. And the same place, the same fafsa.gov that you go to, is where you can and will have the opportunity to apply for the PIN. Now, if you're a student, a dependent student who needs to use the parents' information, if you are submitting the form electronically, you need to make sure you apply for a PIN for your parent, one of your parents as well. And the PIN that you create now is the same PIN you will be using this year, the year after, and every single time that you have to complete a FAFSA. So make sure you put it a place that you can remember or retrieve it, and make sure you do not share it with anyone, because the PIN is your identity in the eyes of the federal government. That's how you will sign your form, and that's how you will be able to access certain information, personal information. Okay? Again, the site to complete the FAFSA is www.fsa.gov, and there you will have not only access to complete the FAFSA, but also access to apply for a PIN. And if you will be applying as a dependent student, don't forget you need to apply for a PIN for you and a PIN for your parent. Now, very important, I didn't mention it, and let me take the time to quickly mention it, is If for any reason you have any problem creating the pin, you can still submit the form electronically, but you will have to mail the signature page. You have, at the end of it, it's going to ask you how do you want to sign the form. You can still print a signature page and mail it in. I thank you for your participation. Thank you for the great questions. I hope this presentation will help you in your academic journey.